So the 4790K is honestly still a beast, and this is actually part 2 of this video. If you didn't get a chance to watch part 1, I'll catch you up really quickly. So I actually tested this 2080 right here with the 4790K. I tested this 3060 Ti right here with the 4790K, and then I actually tested both of those cards with this Ryzen 5 5500, and we ran all of those scenarios in both Crimson Desert and Counter-Strike 2. So that was part 1, and if you haven't had a chance to watch that video, maybe go back and watch it, but I'll catch you up to speed really quick. It was actually really close. Basically what I wanted to do was see if you were on a 4790K, can you start to throw in some higher graphics cards and see some improvement, especially in comparison to a more modern, AM4 platform. Where does it kind of start to taper off, or how close are the experiences? So in part 2 today, we're actually going to be doing more higher end graphics cards. So the 2080 3060 Ti definitely would have been high end for the time that 4790K came out. They're a little more aged at this point. The 3060 Ti is still a beast. But what we actually have today is an RTX 3080 and also a 9070 XT. So we're gonna be doing the same thing for today's video. We're gonna take both those graphics cards and pair them with both the processors, and we're gonna run through Crimson Desert and Counter-Strike. And at the end of the video, I'm actually gonna show you guys a chart comparing all of the games on both systems and all of the GPUs. In the first game, I showed you guys the chart comparing all the games on both CPUs and both GPUs. And like I said, it was actually really close, and I don't want to spoil things, but there might have been some surprises if you had some preconceived notions about what to expect. So today, at the end, like I said, we're gonna get to see all of the games, and at some point I have this theory that we're gonna see both of these CPUs behind me, perhaps see some diminishing returns on the higher end graphics cards. That's just my thought. Now, real quick, going back to the 2080 that you saw on that computer, I actually have a newsletter where I update you guys of upcoming content. So I realize I'm a smaller channel now, but I want to make this a channel that's built around the community where you guys can influence the way the videos come out and the games that are played, how hardware is tested, all that kinds of stuff. So I put out in advance on the newsletter things that I'm either going to be doing or thinking about doing, and let you guys leave comments about what you would like to see in that specific video or what you would like to see coming out of that type of content. And it's a free product, but I do have a paid version where if you guys just want to support the channel, help me keep my lights on, all that kind of great stuff, the paid version actually allows you to potentially win a PC on June 15th. So it's $5 a month. And if you are entered, I know it says 3 months on there, but I'm kind of a newer channel. So if you're on there for a month or two, we'll figure it out. But it's $5 a month for 3 months. You're automatically entered June 15th, and then I'm doing another one December 15th, but that's the PC for June 15th that you could potentially win. Let's go ahead and start benchmarking these games. We're gonna start out on the 4790K, we're gonna do the 3080, then the 9070 XT, and then we'll jump over to the 5500, and we'll do the 3080 and the 9070 XT, and like I said, at the very end, we will compare all of it to see how close the 4790K is to the 5500, and if that, I think it's 12 years old at this point, if that 12-year-old CPU is really still kicking and competing with modern hardware. All right, you guys, so we have our first game here, Crimson Desert, loaded up with the 3080 on the 4790K. If you guys did watch that first part of this video, you would have had a chance to see that this game actually kind of outperformed on the 4790K than it did on the 5500. So very interesting, but again, I would recommend going back to watch that video. The first thing I will note is the graphic quality is actually insane on this. For this being a 12-year-old processor, now obviously we've jumped up to a 3080, which is still a pretty strong card. And I do only have 16 gigs of RAM in this, so that's something to keep in mind, like if we ever do see any perhaps stuttering or anything, but I'm really impressed with the FPS right now. That's pretty high. As I mentioned in the first part, I think I'm just gonna start giving Crimson Desert more of a try because I've only been doing it in like one area. So I've been seeing a lot of like people just say, just play the game, just run around and do stuff and figure out, like you're never gonna do one thing, or like everyone's gonna have different stories. So I'm just gonna kind of wander around and let things happen. I don't know exactly what to expect. Now there is no sound because this particular motherboard can't handle multiple USB devices. I I've even used a different power supply. That's why you guys are seeing like all the cables out here. The power supply that I had on there didn't have a 3-pin 8. You know, I had to use a different power supply, but I'm mostly just gonna wander around. I know that us not being directly in the city is going to increase the FPS by a slight margin, but I just kind of wanted to roam. But keep in mind, this is a 12-year-old CPU. I think the 3080 came out in like 2020 or something. So at this point, it's like a 6-year-old GPU. So this is honestly like extremely playable. What are these people out here doing? If you haven't heard it before, I just don't have, oh, geez, sorry, man. I don't always have time. I know that sounds weird because I am playing video games for YouTube, but like outside of this, I don't always have time to play video games or really ever. Ooh, can I go down this? Whee! Oh, ow, oh my gosh. Oh, that's so cool. I can swim. All right, maybe at some point I'll just have to give this more of a shot. But we're getting really high FPS. I think on the 3060 Ti and all of that. Oh, get out. Oof. You know, we weren't nearly this high, but I have no clue where I'm going or what I'm doing. So you guys are just kind of getting to see me run around a little bit. That is probably enough though for this test. Now we're gonna swap over to Counter-Strike 2. I don't know, because that's more of a CPU limited game, so I really don't know what to expect there on, you know, if there's gonna be a massive improvement from the 2080 3060 Ti to the 3080, so I guess let's go find out. All right guys, so now we have Counter-Strike loaded up on the 3080 and the 4790K. Let me go ahead and start our test really quick. I did forget to show you guys the settings on, I think I forgot to show you on Crimson Desert. We were on low. I've been keeping everything the same for all the cards. So on this, we've been doing medium, so I will go ahead and set that to medium. It did lag out a little bit there, but that's fine. Oh, it should be mentioned, this is a 1440p monitor. So I haven't mentioned that in this video yet. I did in part 1, but this is a 1440p monitor. The FPS seems kind of lower potentially than what I was getting on the other GPUs, which is exactly what I said may end up happening. Well, no, okay, so at some points you seem like we're kind of spiking higher. No, okay, now it seems like it's consistently higher. So maybe it was just one of those things where like it was loading and changing things, but it seems like it is staying higher at the moment. So it's always also so hard with these kinds of tests because there's just so many scenarios that I can't control, I can't change it. And like I know that people use like the CAN benchmarks that are built in to make it easier to be like consistent, but I don't feel like that always is representative of like I don't feel like that's always representative of like a real world experience, because if you guys are watching this, there's a chance that you're on a 4790K, or like maybe you're on an even like older or slower CPU and you're thinking like, well, can I get to a better graphic? Like these kinds of videos are more directed at an audience like that, where it's not gonna be a perfect scenario. Like you're not gonna pair this with the exact GPU that you need. But, you know, maybe you're gonna be able to upgrade and you found something decent on Marketplace or eBay or Java, or wherever you end up purchasing something and you're like, will my CPU hold? You know, that's kind of why I like making this content. I find it just fascinating, and it's interesting to me, but I find it fascinating because, you know, I feel like it's just more representative of what a lot of people go through to, like when you make upgrades, you're not going from one perfect thing to the next perfect thing. Like you're probably doing one part here, one part there. So, you know, that's just what interested me in trying to make this a little more realistic for you guys. I feel like this is plenty here. This is probably a good spot for us to swap over to the 9070 XT. We'll run Crimson Desert. All right, you guys, now we are on the 9070 XT, 4790K in Crimson Desert. Let's go ahead and verify again that we are in low. I'm keeping everything on low just to try to keep it as relatively consistent as possible. Yeah, no ray regeneration, VSync off, cool. You know, I think I'm actually gonna run back to the city on this one because I just wanted to see what the FPS looked like. So I think from card to card we were getting like 40 to 45 on the 2080. On the 3060 Ti, okay, so it definitely has dropped now that we are in the city, which is significantly more CPU intensive. So that first run on the 3080 is definitely going to be more skewed, but I think we are still seeing potentially higher highs. Yeah, oh yeah, we're definitely getting some harder drops. So won't be completely apples to apples just because I I did the test a little bit different on the last one, but it's fine because, you know, when you're, you know, as I mentioned in the first part, not every part of the game is going to be exactly the same. Like if you're out here in these more open world concept parts, like we're clearly seeing we're getting a lot of FPS. And I'll say this again as I've said it before, 40 to 45 is pretty solid on Crimson Desert, in my opinion. Wow, that did take a second to load in. I don't know if you guys saw that there, but the house took a second for the textures to load in. So I think that like potentially there are some limitations on this CPU. But yeah, this is feeling pretty solid. I will say this every time I play Crimson Desert. Oh, okay. Are those things? Oh, they are moving. They're blowing in the wind. I thought it was like loading in late. I will say this every single time I play Crimson Desert. It takes way too long to get in the game, at least initially. And I know that that's probably because it's just loading this massive world where there's a million things, but like it took me probably 30 minutes to load this game first on the 4790K each time I switched to a different graphics card. So, you know, I know that doesn't affect people that don't do what I do every time, but for me, it can be a little challenging at times. So this looks really good, very impressive. I've noticed maybe like a minor stutter once, but outside of that, like really good. The game looks really good. You know, I wouldn't personally go out and buy a 9070 XT. Oh, am I not allowed to go that way? There we go. Okay, the bridge hadn't loaded. I noticed that same thing before when I tried this. Yeah, I personally wouldn't go out and buy a 9070 XT to pair it with a 4790K. At that point, you might want to consider upgrading, but this is still a very solid performance. You know, I would play this if I just so happen to have a 4790K and a 9070 XT. Like I would feel comfortable using this. And the other thing to make a comment about is like on the 4590, everything was slow. Getting windows open, and it's possible I damaged the 4590, like maybe at some point, like getting all the old thermal paste off of there. So I don't want to blame that on there, but like the 4790K is pretty snappy. It's pretty fast in everything. The only time I ever really see it have like a struggle is if we're in intensive gaming that's maybe very CPU demanding. Let's go ahead and swap over to Crimson Desert, Counter-Strike 2 and test that out. All right, you guys, we are in the final game on the 4790K with the 9070 XT. Counter-Strike 2 here. Let's go ahead and verify that we are still on the same settings really quickly. We are on medium. Let's make sure I actually get this test going. I think we're getting higher FPS. Now, again, I will always say this. There are better benchmarkers than I am. It's by a long shot that are more consistent, will give you more reliable numbers. And there's probably a fair amount of human error somewhere on my part. So, you know, when you're watching my content, it's like it is helpful. It is the information definitely can be relatable, but there's always a small chance that like I have misrepresented the number or made a mistake somewhere. So, you know, just keep that in mind. I guess the important thing to remember when I'm making these kinds of videos is it's not always apples to apples. Like again, as I said, this is not the CAN benchmark. There's a chance that I have messed up something somewhere. So, you know, there could be some numbers that are askew somewhere, which, you know, generally if the number is like just barely off or it's wildly different, like that's what I'll usually attribute it to. But I am seeing really, really, really solid FPS and like nothing on this that makes me feel any kind of grossness at all. And I think the 3080 and this have been the best two cards, which I did not expect because I thought the 4790K would be the limiting factor. And I still think it is. Nice. Wait, I did get that guy. I still think it is, but it's doing a lot better in these FPS esports games than I expected it to do. I really genuinely expected it to hit a cap where it was not going to improve anymore. So for us to be improving from graphics card to graphics card, like I would be really curious if I had a 5080 or even a 5070 Ti. I think a 5090 would be fun too. Any of those really that I could throw in here, I would 100% try that out. Oh, I got him, nice. Because I don't think we're done seeing improvement. Based on what I've seen so far, I know that obviously there's a bottleneck. I think we we misuse that term. Like a bottleneck means that, I think we misuse that term personally. I think that like people think like bottleneck means that it's just not gonna work. Like it's a waste of your money, or it's a waste of your time, or whatever it might be. But like, it's going to not fully utilize the 9070 XT, the 5080, the 4790K is 100% the limiting factor, but it's also not going to not use it at all. Like, it's still going to be a strong card. You could just get better performance out of it if you were to swap to something else. I'm really impressed with this so far. The 4790K is really interesting. And if you didn't watch part 1, I'm actually going to be in my area hosting a local tournament to give this PC away. So if you guys, I usually don't tell people to subscribe because I personally don't think it's a great metric. I think a good metric is if people come back to watch your content, because I'm subscribed to tons of channels that I haven't seen or been recommended their video in probably years. So if you are interested, there will be a video probably in the next 2 months where I set up a local tournament in my area of rock, paper, scissors, and the person that wins is actually going to get this PC, not the 9070 XT. I'll probably put a 1660 Super in there, but this is it's got a 2 terabyte SATA SSD, 16 gigs of RAM, a 4790K. So that's something I've been really excited for, because I had the 4590 for a long time, and I realized that was too slow to actually justify like giving away to someone. It would be like them, getting something that didn't work. So I am really excited to do that, if that's content that you guys are interested in. But I've clearly done enough blabbing and rambling in this. So we're going to swap over to the Ryzen 5 5500. We'll get the 3080 in there and start out with Crimson Desert. All right, guys, so we finally have the 5500 loaded up with the 3080. We're on Crimson Desert. I'll go ahead and show you the settings really quickly. I don't understand why it makes it so difficult to get to these settings. All right, we are same settings here, no frame gen or anything like that's on, or upscaling. Graphics, just continue to keep it on low. We're gonna run around the city again. I wanted to do more, but I never can seem to get myself somewhere else, so. Hey, leave me alone, guard, jeez. The game seems really smooth, looks really good. I think we're potentially getting a few more FPS. It's really hard to like compare the 4790K to this, because I think in some instances I have felt that the 4790K was potentially stronger, just less stable. And we even saw that in some of like the 2080 and 3060 Ti comparisons. But it's just so hard to tell, because I think this one does technically have a higher clock speed, but who knows? As I like to say, I'm just some guy on the internet. It still looks good, runs smooth. I don't see any issues with it. I'm not having like any kind of lag or slowness, motion blur. It all feels pretty solid. So I feel like that's enough for Crimson Desert on the 3080. Let's go ahead and jump over to Counter-Strike 2. All right, guys, Counter-Strike 2 with the 3080. Laughing here because instead of walking down the stairs with something, my daughter is deciding to throw something down the stairs so she doesn't have to go get it. So anyway, let me show you the settings that we're on really quickly here. We are on medium. Like I said, this is the 3080. It's really hard for me to know from game to game like how well it's performing in comparison, like unless there's just like a massive jump. Oh, I missed. Nothing so far that's like an indicator that it's outperforming or performing worse or anything like that. Yeah, I mean, it's always so hard to tell because I don't think it's getting any more or any less than it does on any of the other cards at this point. I think we are definitely starting to see like CPU limitations, but it'll be interesting because once I get to the graph, that's actually like what will tell the real story. My like expertise and help, when I'm describing the games and all that, is really only if the performance is poor or it's like extremely noticeably better. And I'm not getting either of those. I'm not like, man, this is the best thing I've ever played in my entire life. Can't believe it's this good. It's also not like, man, I just lag every 5 seconds. How could I play this? Okay, well, I'm feeling like this is probably enough. I'm just gonna hit this guy with a 360 deagle. I wonder if I should include how many times I tried to fail that. 360 deagle. I'm gonna try it one more time, and you guys are gonna think this is my first attempt. Quick 360 dump, deagle to the head. Try a 360 no scope. Let me go and try and no scope really fast. Quickly 360 no scope this guy, and quickly 360 no scope this guy right here. Quickly 360 no scope that guy. 360 no scope that guy. Let's jump over to the 9070 XT now. All right, you guys, we are finally on the most powerful card of all of them on the 5500. So in theory, this should give us the best numbers of everything, in theory. So Crimson Desert here. Let's go ahead and make sure that we are on. Every time that stinking key gets me, and I don't know how to get out of it. And once again, you guys are probably laughing here. What? What has happened? Oh, let me out. Let me out. So once again, I will go ahead and put everything in low. And I recognize, like, if you were to buy a 3080 or a 9070 XT or a 5080 or even like a 5060 Ti 16 gig, like, you're not going to be playing a game on 1440p low. You're probably going to be wanting medium or high or ultra or whatever kind of settings. But this is just for entertainment purposes and also like some educational, because like benchmarking things is helpful. But like, if you see something if you see a graphics card that's on a really good deal, and it's like right now there's a 9070 XT sitting on my marketplace for $600. The only reason it hasn't sold is because AMD is not as known. If that were a 5080 at $600, people would buy it. If that were a 5080 at $800, it'd probably be gone tomorrow. Shoot, if that were a 5080 at, or if that were a 5070 Ti at $750, it'd probably be gone today. So like, the only reason it's not selling is because people don't know what the 9070 XT can do. Let's go in here and get some benchmarking done. Can I jump from here to here? Yeah, so like, yes, I could bump this up. Like, in fact, here, let me show you guys really quickly, just so you'll believe me. I'm gonna bump this up to high. And this is a Ryzen 5 5500. I know this is gonna skew some of the numbers and all of that, but look, I'm running high and there's no delay. There's no problems with movement. The game looks amazing. And you would be thinking, oh, you should be getting tons of bottlenecking. And yes, there is bottleneck, but bottleneck isn't always the worst thing if your budget can't afford to be in perfect harmony. So anyway, let me go ahead and throw this back into low, just because I'm some guy on the internet and you guys probably don't believe me, just like I've had people say before, the 9070 XT isn't a 4K card, so I clicked off your video. Yes, it is a 4K card. In fact, if you would like to go watch the video of me playing in 4K on a 75-inch TV, feel free to do so. It's on this channel. And I played Cyberpunk and Black Myth Wukong and Space Marine 2. And this feels good. I actually don't know if there's much of a difference on this 9070 XT. In fact, I think no, it's getting up there. It's getting pretty high. The CPU is 100% the limiting factor for this combination, but it's still not like the worst thing ever. Like, think about this from a logistical standpoint. You can find a 9070 XT for $650 to $700 or so on the used market. And you can find an i7 4070-90K with the motherboard, with DDR3 RAM for probably less than $100. So you could build an entire PC for probably like $850 to $900 and play 1440p. And as soon as you can afford to buy AM5 or anything faster, like, you're already at 4K. That's nuts. So I'm gonna jump to Counter-Strike 2, stop rambling. Let's go there. Very, very final game of this whole test, and then we're gonna get to see the graph, and I am so excited. So I'll show you the settings really quickly while I am rambling on. How do I get to them? Right here, yeah. So I'm gonna make sure we're on medium. The interesting thing is I have a friend, a local friend, I actually met him through Marketplace, ironically enough, and I told him I was gonna do this test, and he's like, the 5500 is gonna win. Obviously, it's newer, it's faster. And in my mind, like, I am so bad with numbers and like reading clock speeds and all of that. I just knew that the 4070-90K is just like this legendary car or legendary CPU. It's supposed to be super great, and like the 5500 is just a cut down budget card. People hate it. And I was thinking in my head, I'm like, I don't know. I think it's gonna be pretty close. And you know, in the first video, again, I don't want to completely spoil it, but if you haven't watched it, it's pretty darn close. And I don't want to ruin some of the information of which way it leans or how things go, but it's really darn close. And I'm excited to see, once we have all the cards, how close it actually is, because it really is like an interesting thought. Do you just live with Windows 10 and save yourself a couple $100s? I mean, even now, DDR4 RAM is super expensive, and very seldomly have I found myself going over like 16 gigs of RAM. I think in like Cinematic on Black Myth Wukong and Arc Raiders and some of those other games, like if you're at 1440p at the very top, I've seen RAM go that high. But here, we're on 1440p low, and we haven't hit 16 gigs. I'm gonna have a whole montage here of me trying to fail. All right, guys, 1360 Deagle, and then I'm on about my business. 1360 Deagle on this guy right here. Boom, boom. Ah, all right. Let's go to the chart. Okay, so maybe some of you guys waited or just skipped all the way ahead to this, but this is the part I really anticipated, and maybe you did too. So how I have this chart broken up is I have two separate charts. So if you look up here at the very top, I have Crimson Desert on one, and then the other one is going to be Counter-Strike 2. So let's go ahead and start with Crimson Desert. Make sure you guys can read that okay. So the way it's broken down is it goes 2080, 3060 Ti, 3080, 9070 XT. The blue is the average. So on the 2080, higher average on the 4790K on Crimson Desert, and a higher max on the 4790K, and a higher 1% low. So everything went out on the 2080. On the 3060 Ti, we did see a higher average, a higher 1% low, a higher max. And then on the 3080, we saw a sizable advantage from the 4790K, a sizable advantage from the 1% low, and then an actual higher max on the 5500. On the 9070 XT, a decent size advantage to the 5500, a much better 1% low, and then a significantly higher, wow, significantly higher max. So this is showing me here that we saw a much better usage on the max end on the 9070 XT, and I'm attributing this here, this 0.9 right there. 0.9 right there is probably human error. I'm assuming this is human error, this is human error, and this is human error. This is probably to me starting the recording too soon. So on a single player game like this, it kind of seems like it was neck and neck, and one pulled ahead sometimes, the other pulled ahead other times. So that's probably human error, different scenes, all kinds of things. But it basically shows me that these two are identical in single player. We're gonna go to the CS2 chart now, which is going to probably prove that the 5500 was stronger, I'm guessing. So again, same numbers. Blue is average, orange is 1% low, and then the max. So weirdly, the 4790K, and some of these things are gonna be map difference or like scenery difference in Crimson Desert. But here for CS2, an almost 8 FPS, and what, a 7, I think I remember that from yesterday, and then a 50 max difference on the 4790K on the 2080. Here, we saw a much higher average on the 3060 Ti, much higher 1% low, and a significantly higher max. Weirdly, on the 3080, we saw a much higher average. Wow, that's way higher. We saw much better 1% low. Again, these things are probably contributed to me starting the test too soon or something else happening. But the max actually favored the 4790K by a lot. Dude, this just keeps going back and forth. The 9070 XT, we did see more out of the 4790K, a lot higher on the 1% low, and then barely above it on the max. This is wild. I can't believe it was that close. I mean, like, think about it. One of them came out 2 years ago, something like that. I think it was 23, so maybe 3 years ago that the 5500 came out. And the other one came out in 2014. That's a 10-year gap between those two. And one of them is sitting at 14 years old, and it's still going blow for blow. Like, literally every other game was 4790K, 5500, 40. So that's so wild. I literally think you can get 16 gigs of wherever the DDR3 build is, 16 gigs of DDR3 for probably like $10 or $15, maybe more. I don't know. I haven't looked that up. But like, compare that to how much you find AM4, DDR4, whatever the words are that I'm trying to say. Like, that's probably like, I've seen them go for like 50 bucks. And it's like brand new, it's like $75 sometimes, or, you know, new 32 gig sets are $200 to $300 at this point. So imagine going back to DDR3 on something like that, where the stutters are not that bad and 1% lows aren't that often. So I don't know, this was a really cool test. I really enjoyed it. I'd love for some of you guys to get into the charts and tell me what you see in there. And maybe if you have experience with the 4790K, like maybe you're still perhaps using it and you've got it with one of those high-end graphics cards. I just thought it was a really fascinating test. I'd love to know what kind of test you guys would like to see in the future. I mean, I could do the 4790K versus the 9600X, or I did just pick up the 250K plus. So, a 14-year difference for Intel. Not the highest end, but it's like mid-end versus the flagship of the day. That would be an interesting test, but I really enjoyed that. I hope you guys did too. And, If you wanted to see more, I could definitely do more games if there was a massive interest in this, and do maybe like 10 to 15 games, and we probably would see even more even. My guess would be is that we would see even more evenness, and that it would just be blow for blow in different games. And I could try it on higher settings and stuff like that. It probably would be a bigger part video, maybe like 3 to 5 episodes or something like that. But if that's something you guys wanted to see, leave a comment, let me know the games, you know, and I'll consider doing that. I am, as I mentioned, going to give that 4790K away. That'll probably be within like the next 2 to 3 months, so I still have plenty of time to do content with it. Otherwise, as you go, don't forget about the newsletter. There's the free version, and then if you are interested, you can potentially win this gaming PC right here. But as you guys go, be sure to check out some of these other videos, and I will catch you in the next one.